Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie Schuster, and I'm the Director of Conferences and Events for the Online Learning Consortium. Thank you for joining us today or for watching the recording in the future for this Presenter Services webinar focusing on workshops. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to our Presenter Services Chair, Jean Mandernack, to introduce our webinar presenter today.
Thank you. As Katie mentioned, I get the opportunity to lead up the presenter services. If you're not familiar with presenter services, we offer a range of resources and support to help enhance any of the different presentation types you might be doing at OLC. So in addition to webinars like what you're attending today, we also have a lot of quick tips and worksheets, and we offer coaching. So I encourage you to take a look on the website at Presenter Services if there's anything that we could possibly help you out with. Today, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Lawrence Ragan. He is recently retired from Penn State University, but was still willing to come back and join us today to share his expertise on conducting a good workshop. When he was at Penn State, he was part of the creation and management of the Penn State World Campus, and he also spent many years as the director for Director for Instructional Design and Director of Academic Outreach Faculty Development. Big title. He also served as the co-director for the Center for Online Innovation and Learning. I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Ragan, so thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jean. Thanks, Katie. It's always great to be with my OLC colleagues. We were reminiscing before the program here of the number of years that we've been engaged with various names, OLC, and before that, Sloan C. So it's always great. It's been my community. So it's always a pleasure when I get invited to come back and do anything. I do. I should mention that I haven't knocked out the retirement thing so well. I've got lots of projects going on, including running workshops. And so this topic is one very near and dear to my heart. It's one I love doing because these are the kind of activities that I particularly think that my skill sets and my abilities are well suited to. And I think I'm pretty good at it because of my personality, style, and approach, but also because of the nature of workshops. And I'll talk a little bit about that going through. I say that not to brag so much, but to think that not everybody is cut out for doing workshops. And so thinking about, is this your gig? And if this is your format or a style of audience interactions, then it's something that you may want to consider sort of developing as a particular skill set, because I think doing a good workshop is not something that's necessarily an easy thing to do. So having said that, let's move on. And what I'm going to do today is just walk you through what I call sort of the art and science of crafting an effective workshop, and subtitled "Consider This." And the reason I say the subtitle is "Consider This" is there's a lot to consider in designing a workshop. I'm going to presume for a moment that we're talking about, when we use the word workshop, we're talking about an event, an educational event that is going to be 2, 4, perhaps even 8 hours in length or longer. I've done workshops that are multiple day workshops, and obviously more planning and such, but it's not a 20-minute or a 30-minute or a 50-minute or even an hour type experience. Generally, workshops are thought of as a bit more expanded and typically a higher level of engagement with the audience, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And so I think the art and science of designing and delivering an effective workshop is something that for a lot of people is a bit overwhelming and intimidating. And I just want to take a little time today, kind of break it down and tell you what my experience has been like. I'll say this from the beginning, I am going to move through this a bit quickly because we've only got 30 minutes and I've got some ideas I really want to get out to you. Those things that I think are going to be pretty well already understood, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on them. And so I'm going to try to focus on those features that I think that I have learned over time of doing workshops practically my entire professional career, so 30 some years at Penn State. Um, I'm going to focus on those things, those lessons I've learned, and where I might encourage you to be thinking about how to design the most effective workshop you can. Audience, obvious. Well, first of all, I want to back up. The approach we're thinking about here is strategic, meaning we're going to break down the experience of a workshop and think systematically and strategically about each one of these elements and how that's our palette that we have to choose from, and how we take each one of these features and work with it to create the workshop. We've probably all been to workshops that turned out to be 3-hour lectures, 6-hour lectures, or even an 8-hour lecture, or perhaps a series of 1 hour after 1 hour after 1 hour, and it's called a workshop. I'm not putting those down, but that's not my style of a workshop. That's just a really long lecture. And what I want to be thinking about is that issue of audience engagement, and I'll tease that apart a little bit. So we're gonna talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about some audience analysis, designing the format for your program, some of the materials you might need, timing of the event, the kinds of activities you may consider using, the ability to adjust on the fly, and of course evaluations, both formative and summative. So my biggest piece of advice, as a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you a quick story here. My wife is I've retired, but my wife works as a speech pathologist here in our area, and has recently been asked to do workshops. She works a lot with children with autism, and so she's been putting on these workshops. So this is near and dear to my heart, and it's the exact process that I worked through with Laurie to help her prepare her workshop. She was doing a full day program for other speech people in our region, and this is the approach we took. Number one was plan. Workshops are not something that you're going to be able to shoot from the hip. If you run out of time or you run out of activities, you have to over plan, over prepare. Don't stress, but I think over preparing, thinking deeply about the whole process will help you not be stressed, because you will be able to have confidence and feel comfortable in your event. I always do something I call a mental run-through or walk-through of my program. That is, I go to a very quiet space, I sit down, and I think and I visualize each and every activity. Okay, I'm going to have the participants get up now. They're going to take 2 minutes to walk toward the board, and then they're going to do this activity. I let that play out in my mind. Based on experience, I'm going to think, okay, it's around the break time, so how do we blend in the break with this activity? I do that in my mind in order to understand the dynamic. So when the program comes up, again, I've sort of anticipated a lot of the actual outcome, the flow of the program. I always talk to others about it. I always steal best ideas. That is, when I go to other programs, workshops, I'm always watching for the strategies they use and the techniques they use. And I think, now, does that have application in my program? Obviously, the ones I like. The other ones, we let those go. So as we all would agree, I'm sure workshops are different. They are different in their style, format, and approach. I always took the word workshop very seriously, because I think participants come expecting to be engaged. Sometimes they don't care so much about being about actually working. I had more than one program come up afterwards, and a participant said, "Oh, I didn't really like this workshop. We really had to work." And that is, they were also, in my opinion, driving toward their own learning. And if they have the expectation of being spoon-fed and come to a program where you've really got them doing something, it may be a shift in their expectations as well. So we'll think about, what's the content we want to get out there? How do we want to do interactions, activities, the networking part of workshops? What are the artifacts? That is, what are the leave behinds? I'm very big on having people leave with something they created, ideas. It's best, of course, if you can get the whole community to contribute to those artifacts. People leave like they've got something in their hands, something that they can point to, show others, learn from, and so forth. And of course, some of it is going to have to do with your personal style. How much do you enjoy the process of managing a workshop, this complex activity of people interacting, you needing to get content out, making adjustments on the fly, and so forth. So audience analysis, I won't go into great detail about this, except for just a note about considering the setup of expectations. I think balancing expectations is probably one of the most important points of conducting a workshop. Being really clear on what your program is going to be about and what it's not going to be about will go a long way. The more you can write that into your abstract and be clean, succinct, and then stay true to that, the happier everyone else will be. Even if in the end they would say, oh, I hoped you were going to talk about this, or I hoped we were going to do about this. You're able to come back and say, well, this is what I put as my objectives, and that's what I drove toward. The format, kind of drawing back on comments earlier, depends a little bit on you, depends on your content. I always drive hard to understand what objectives. If I'm doing a workshop for somebody else, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was at a local university here in Pittsburgh, conducting a half-day workshop in that case, and I spent a lot of time with the project lead, understanding the nature of their gathering, but also what did that individual want as the outcome. And I'd say, what do you, when you, at the end of this workshop, what do you want to have in your hands? Because that then builds everything you do. All of your objectives are leading up to that point. Timing is critical. We'll talk about that in a minute, and we've mentioned style and comfort level. Something to just keep in mind is the practicality of the materials you'll be engaged. If you are relying heavily on web-based, internet-based activities and such, some of the homework you're going to want to do, of course, is making sure that you have adequate connectivity and adequate bandwidth if you've got your participants doing something. I love to use real live resources during the classroom, whether it's me showing a YouTube clip or it's me having the participants do an assignment where they have to go out and find something and bring it back. The thing that'll sink your boat on that one quickly, of course, is if we didn't think through internet connection, or we have internet connection, but oh, by the way, we don't have the password for the network. These funny things have happened, and when they're happening live to you, it's not so funny. So again, that over planning is a really good idea. I'd go back to my environment, whoever's hosting, and saying, can you give me assurances? How many people are we going to have? Does the bandwidth? And it's less of an issue today, I think, but it's still just worth asking. Also, if you're using media, PowerPoints, videos, whatever you might be using, do tests on that stuff. There are occasions where you'll pull up the video at your desk, runs beautifully, everything's good to go, no problems, and you shift then to the presentation or of the workshop, and you want to show that video, and all of a sudden it won't come up. You've got to make sure that video, for example, is not tied to your operating system on your computer. Again, this happens less frequently, but if you're using those technologies, I tend to go toward the lowest common denominator. Honestly, now more frequently I'm doing PDFs of my materials, and it seems to eliminate a lot of those formatting issues and compatibility issues. But and by the way, I always think about, do I really need to have printed handouts of my material? Frequently, you really don't. Or if you do, you can provide 4 slides on a page and let folks make notes if they wish. But I tend not to do that anymore. For me, it's an environmental issue largely. You're printing out 15, 30 pages per participant, and it's going to wind up in the compost bin. I'd rather say to folks, I'm going to send you the PowerPoint. You can print it if you wish and mark it up as you so desire. This is one of the biggest issues, I think, is clock management, time management. So if you're a sports fan, you know how critical clock management is in almost all sports, but we hear a lot about it during football. And I've never quite figured it out how they do it in a football game. It's more complex for me, but boy, it is really important when you're thinking about designing your workshop. Know when your breaks are planned. Know what time you start and what time you're supposed to end. You'd be amazed at the number of times you go in thinking that, we're starting at 8:30, only to find out that it's 9 o'clock or it's 9:30 or it was 8 o'clock. I go back and I check those points with my host multiple times, and I'll say, now, please just remind me, are we ending at 3 o'clock? Is that when you want to be done? So that you have it in your mind of when you start and when you end. Then, if you know your breaks, you begin to get this sense of the blocks of time you have to work with. A 3-hour workshop really boils down to 2 segments with a break in between. And you've now got to manage an hour and 15 hour 30 minutes, and because you lose some time to that break. So again, just thinking about how that's going to affect your agenda and your activities, I think is a really important part of your planning for this event. So this is my favorite topic, I have to tell you, instructional activities. And sometimes I probably go a little bit too far on instructional activities, but I find this the art part, and I love it. That is, what kind of events, what kind of educational experiences can I have my participants do in order to reach an outcome? So I've already shared with you, I tend not to go into a workshop thinking that I am the font of all knowledge on this topic. I tend to rather go in saying, I've got good experiences, good background, I have knowledge, but I also want to work with you as a group of participants and do something with that. In my case, I like to see us produce something new. That requires, setup, movement considerations, thinking about the timing of those activities, thinking about reconfiguring potentially the room, something to think about carefully if you've got tabletop structures that you have to maybe move around. And obviously, in the end, it's the value to the participants. Are they leaving with something that they want and or desire? I also try for a variation of strategies, although I'll tell you, if you've got a 3-hour workshop, you're probably going to be working with one type of an instructional strategy, perhaps 2, but it'll limit your time a little bit. One I've been using a lot lately, I love it as an icebreaker, an opening session, is something called the World Cafe model, based on building 4 questions that your audience will work on. You get everybody up at first thing before the session almost even starts, which I love to do because it kind of shocks people. They're going to have to get engaged. They were just sitting down, they've got their coffee, and they're ready for you to start, pontificating, and you're saying, oh no, we're going to get up, and here's what I want you to do. I need a person over here to be the anchor person, and we're going to move around. So it's only going to take 7 minutes. But immediately you're sending the message that this is going to be active, engaged, and we need you. We need your participation. And typically people really enjoy it. It also creates that network right away. If you don't do that, there's all kind of other activities, icebreaker activities, large notepad things where you can have people going around with sticky, putting ideas up and so forth. To me, that's the most enjoyable aspect, is thinking through those instructional activities. The real world time, or am I getting world? The real time adjustments that we have to make are really challenging for a couple reasons. I've made the mistake of listening to one or two individuals in a workshop who maybe says something to me over the coffee during the break, and I think, oh yeah, I'm going to make that adjustment. I make that adjustment to perhaps appease the individual who recommended it, only to find out there were only 2 of the 30 people in the room who wanted to go that direction. So that's where I'll go back and say, once you pick your objectives in your plan, for the most part, I would suggest you're going to work on that. It doesn't mean that you can't address other questions that come up, other issues and challenges, but be careful about being over flexible. I've done this, and it's kind of exciting and fun, but it's not quite what you promised in your objectives. I always would say to folks, if you're giving me a suggestion or a recommendation that's going to help me improve this program, bring it on. I'm good with that. If you're suggesting something that is of a different interest or a different direction, we'll save that for the next version of the webinar. I'm sorry, of the workshop. So evaluations are those parts where we do it on a formative, that's under the term of adjustments. I think the more you conduct workshops, the more fluid you become with the process and the program, the more comfortable you are to make those adjustments. I think in the end, the adjustments you make are more tweaks. And I mentioned earlier, being careful not to overreact to an individual's input. It may be their expectation that was off, not necessarily what you're delivering for the rest of the group. So be careful of that. Also, the summative evaluations, you do need to be careful about interpreting those. I have a good friend of mine, we were talking about this topic, and she said to me, Larry, I never read my evaluations after a workshop. And this person is good, by the way. She's really talented. And I said, really? I said, how do you make it better? She said, I know what it takes to make it better. She says, they're often criticism based on what the individual had in mind, what they wanted, not what you were going to deliver. That's a very valid point. I do read my evaluations, and sometimes I labor over those 1 or 2 that, weren't perfectly happy and didn't give me the highest ratings. I've gotten a little better about that over the years, and I understand you're simply not going to satisfy everybody, and kind of have to be aware of that and good with that. So what I wanted to do was to leave enough time here, and we've got a couple minutes, and hear maybe what your thoughts were, or challenges, if you will. Do you have a particular challenge that you'd like to put on the table? And let's see if we can work with coming up with a solution for you. I'm also happy to talk about particular instructional strategies I've used that I found effective. But I want to see if there's something we can help you address in probably using the chat. Although, I don't know, Katie, are they allowed to speak? Are we able to give them privileges to speak as well?
Yep. Hi, everyone. You can take the mic at any time to talk about your challenge. I do just want to note that we also do have some logistical considerations to go over with everyone. So maybe we should do that first.
Yes, thank you.
And then use the rest of the time for challenges.
Awesome, thank you. I forgot about that. I forgot about that. Okay.
Larry, if you want to advance, I'm happy to go over these logistical considerations.
Okay, I'm going to leave it here.
Okay, thanks, Larry. So I just want to go over, logistical items with everyone and make sure that you guys have a clear understanding about what your room setup will look like, and then some of the other things I mentioned in the chat as well about session evaluations and things like that. So your rooms will be set up primarily with round tables for your attendees. As you can see in the pictures in the slide, there'll be round tables set, probably 8 chairs in a crescent formation around each. And your room can hold anywhere, you might expect anywhere between 10 and 100 attendees in your workshop session. There really is no way for us to tell you how many people to expect, because we don't require people to pre-sign up for sessions. They're free to move about the conference. So one of the best ways to handle making sure you have enough material for all of your attendees is to make sure that you upload those materials or link to those materials from your OLC session page. And if you have some items that you would like to ask your attendees to, for example, download or check out, an app to make sure they have on their device or anything like that ahead of time, please feel free to email us at the conference@onlinelearning-c.org email address, and we can update your abstract on the OLC website as well so that potential attendees can see that. One thing I want to make sure you do also is any questions you have, please make sure you repeat the question and then answer them using the microphone in your room so that everyone can hear. None of these workshops will be live streamed, but it is still really important from an accessibility perspective to make sure that everyone can hear the question and hear the answer. So we also have everything will be set up so that it can accommodate 16:9 ratio slide format. So that's just something to note also when you're working on your slides or your workshop content. And I wanted, Larry, when you were talking about evaluations, and I want to strongly encourage everyone to solicit feedback from their attendees. And we provide a slide that you can insert at the beginning and at the end of your presentation and your workshop to help remind your attendees to please fill out the session evaluations. This is not, only for our benefit, but it's for your benefit as well. And that way everybody can kind of see your evaluations, including us here at OLC, to help us plan in the future as well, to find out what topics and everything are popular and that people want to see more of. Also, there's wireless internet in your conference space for your attendees. So if you do have resources that are on the internet that you've uploaded to your session page or linked to from your session, your attendees will be able to access it that way. And if you have any AV or tech issues, there will be hall monitors roaming in the hallways so that they can then, you can just kind of flag them down and say you need some AV or tech help. And then they will actually probably get in touch with me. And then we can make sure to send a tech to your room to help you with that. Please let me know if you have any questions logistically. And, Christine, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add as well.
Nope, I'm busy answering items in the chat window.
Okay, I'm going to review the chat really quickly as well, because in the recording, for those people who are watching the recording later, they don't see the chat. So Tammy asks if they're not a formal session evaluation or we just create it. There actually is. We have a standard, it's pretty generic. It's a standard session evaluation form that we have. It's linked from your session page on the OLC website and in the OLC mobile app. So attendees can actually submit those session evaluations through the mobile app, through the web, or through the website. And there's a lot of suggestions for using Google Docs as crowdsourced resources and handouts, which I think is a great suggestion. And that way, again, everybody can have access to that, depending on whether you have 10 people or 100 people in your workshop. If you're using an online resource like Google Docs, it doesn't matter because you can accommodate 10 to 100. Let's see, how many round tables will there be in each room? And how many people at each table? So typically the rooms can accommodate approximately up to 100 participants, and that would be 8 to 10 people at each round table. And there might be a couple rows of theater seating in the back. It really depends on which room and how big exactly the room is, but that would give you an approximate idea of what to expect. And I already talked about supplying the slide. You can actually download the slide for the presenter evaluations from the OLC Presenter Services webpage now. It's linked up there already. And in the event that you are looking for a slide template, we have one that is available for you to use there as well. We do encourage you to use a slide template of your own or from your institution and to, just build your personal brand. But in the event that you do need a slide template or are looking for something, there's one on the Presenter Services webpage that you can download to use also. Let's see. Yep, everybody should bring their own device, including presenters. We do not provide laptops or anything for presenters. We're a nonprofit, and with 575 presenters, that would be pretty impossible. So everybody will need to bring their own laptop or device to present from, and it will be an HDMI connection. So if your laptop doesn't have an HDMI port, please make sure you bring an adapter. If you have a morning session, how early could we get to the room and check the setup and such? If you have an 8:30 start time session, then you would be able to access your room, prior to that. Really, I mean, you could get there at 8, you could get there at 7:30. Breakfast, I believe, starts at 7:30. So anytime 7 and on, I would say, would be fine for you to get there. If you have a 10:30 start time, you would probably not be able to get into your room much before, at all before 10 o'clock, because there will be a workshop in that room prior. There is a break, a networking break, conference-wide from 10 to 10:30. So you could plan on getting into your room at that point if you have a 10:30 start time. Let's see. As Christine mentions that most of the workshop rooms can handle capacity up to 130 people. All the Wednesday workshops are in the Cottonwood rooms, and breakfast that morning will be nearby in the Spruce foyer. Can you hook up your own laptop to the LCD projector? Yes, that is what we encourage you to do. So there will be a connection there. It's an HDMI connection, as I mentioned, for you to hook your laptop up to the in-room AV setup, which will include an LCD projector. Let's see. So for workshops, somebody asked if the sessions were live streamed or recorded. For workshops, we are not live streaming or recording any of the workshops due to the interactive nature of the workshop setting. So there will be about 80, a little over 80 live streamed and recorded sessions throughout the conference, but they will not be any of your workshops Wednesday morning. So I think I've answered all the questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to type them in the chat or grab the mic. And I think, Larry, if there aren't any other questions right now, then you can go back to your challenge exercise.
Okay, well, I'm watching our time here, though, too. Are we okay to go over, or?
I think we're fine to hang out a few more minutes.
Okay, for those of you who can, if you want to hang out for a couple minutes, I'm delighted to talk about this. Someone did ask a little bit earlier about the activities that we do first thing, that I like to do, those warm-up activities. One of my favorite ones I mentioned is this World Cafe activity that I saw at a conference about 2 years ago, and I've used it a lot since. And basically what you do, so all of these activities have to be geared toward or around your content area, and or the topic, if you will, of the workshop. So you're not doing something that's not related. And I found these activities as great ways to bring prior knowledge to the forefront and to get kind of the group knowledge base recorded somehow. And so what I do is I have 4 large sticky pad documents on a table, and different tables around the room. I ask for one person to be an anchor. So they're going to pick one of those sticky pads. On each of the sticky pads, I have a single question. This program I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it was about leadership. And so, one question I had on there had to do with, describe some of the challenges you have in managing up within your leadership domain. So it's an open-ended question, kind of broad. And then on another table, I would have another question. The idea is everybody gets up. So right after we do introductions, I say, okay, we're going to do this exercise now. Everyone get up, find a table to go to. Doesn't matter which one. I'd like to have about 7 people per table, but no more. And I'm going to time you. You get like 3 minutes per table. So depending on the amount of time I have available, we may only do 2 questions. But keep in mind, if you break the room up to go to those tables, you're going to get data on every single sheet. So I'll say, okay, please, the anchor, would you read the question for the group so everyone can see it, and then start firing off ideas and answers to that question, and let's get them recorded. When we do that for 3 minutes, I ask them to get up and move to another table, doesn't matter which one, and the anchor now reads back the question and the responses they got from the first group. So now your second group is building upon that. So they're not repeating what's been said, they're kind of building upon it. When you're done, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 if you have it, you take those big pads, you put them up onto the walls. So now it looks like you've already produced something, and you ask the anchor, could you just give us a quick summary of what your group, what your folks talked about to your question? 2 minutes, you go to the next group and you do the same thing. All of a sudden you have everybody's mind oriented toward the domain that you want to talk about. Already you've captured and shared information that you can then use and refer back to throughout the workshop. I always record those. I'll either take a photo or I'll have them transcribed, and I put them up into a Google Doc and I make them available to people. So it's just a really fast way of gathering insights. You're already starting to create interaction and network, and the activity goes very well. You can also use that at other points in the program, based on the outcome you're trying to drive toward. So I hope that gives you a sense of how that particular activity. I've used it where I've changed the nature of the questions. I think if you go to worldcafe.com or org, or Google that World Cafe term, you'll come up with the model they use. There's some samples there they use. It's really been a great exercise for me. So what other kinds of challenges is anyone dealing with? I'm just going to scroll down here and see if there's anything. Okay, it sounds to me, or seems to me as though you guys are sharing your plans amongst each other, which is just awesome. I'd even encourage you to go to step ahead of that. If you find somebody else's lesson plan that you're looking at and you kind of resonate with, find a time, carve out an hour, and spend a half hour talking about your workshop with your colleague, and spend a half an hour talking about their workshop, and share ideas and let them talk it through. And oftentimes as they're talking it through, you'll say, it sounded a whole heck of a lot better when I was thinking about it myself. Now I see a problem. And it's just that talking out loud, but you're talking out loud with somebody who's in the same space. They're also thinking about their workshop plans, and it's an incredibly beneficial type of an activity to go through for you. Other thoughts, questions? See lots of things here about logistics. I'm going to leave that to Katie and such to talk about. I'll come back, Katie, in a second and see if there's anything else you want to carry through. Oh, Paloma was on. Yeah. So let me leave it at that. Katie, is there anything else you want to clear up or follow up with?
I just want to clear up that we do not actually provide those sticky flip charts that Larry likes to use. So if that's an exercise that you want to emulate, I would recommend using your Google Docs, your collaborative Google Docs, instead of paper sticky flip charts. So I just want to clarify that. Yeah. Thank you.
Or bringing, if I could say, you could also bring in, I've done it many times where you can buy them there at the local Kinko's or something and bring them in if that's a strategy you'd really like to use.
Yep. And there's a business center on site in the conference space, as Christine was saying in the chat too. So if you do have materials that you would like to ship to the conference, you can do that and ship it to the business center at the conference space at your expense. So that is an option as well. And also they would have, kind of basic supplies also if you need post-it notes or index cards or anything like that, if you don't want to bring them yourself. So, and then I would like to just say thank you to Larry and to Jean and to everybody who attended today. And great conversation, great questions, and we'll wrap up, but then Christine and Jean and I, maybe Larry if you're available, will hang out for another couple of minutes to answer any additional questions that you might have. And if you do have any additional questions later, please feel free to email us again at conference@onlinelearning-c.org, and we are happy to help out with any questions that you might have.
And I'll put a plug in for you guys. Every time I've worked with you, regardless of the length or the duration of the workshops, you folks have been awesome to work with, and you've just been good collaborators to make things go smoothly. So I've always appreciated that.
Thank you, Larry. Jean, do you want to wrap any additional items up from the presenter services standpoint?
No, I don't really have anything. I just want to thank Dr. Ragan. That was wonderful. I learned a lot. And if there's anybody as you're starting to move forward and you think, man, I'd just like somebody to look at my slides or bounce ideas off of, I would encourage you to reach out to Presenter Services. We offer lots of different one-on-one coaching and various things. We'd love to help you out. So thank you very much.
Terrific.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I did put the presenter services link in the chat again for anybody who needs to access that. And we look forward to seeing all of you in Denver in a few short weeks.